You have been lied to about what makes you powerful as a man, told that conquest equals strength, while your soul slowly starves from chasing empty victories that leave you more hollow with each passing day. The greatest philosopher of human potential, Friedrich Nietzsche, saw this trap coming over a century ago and left us warnings about how lust corrupts the very force that should make us magnificent, how the desperate need for validation through others transforms warriors into beggars, how modern men mistake the slavery of compulsion for the freedom of choice. What you are about to discover will shatter every comfortable illusion you hold about desire, power, and what it truly means to become the man you were born to be, because Nietzsche understood that the path to authentic strength requires facing the most uncomfortable truths about how we waste our life, force pursuing shadows, while our real potential withers in the darkness of self-deception. Every man carries within him a force that Nietzsche called the will to power, the fundamental drive to grow, expand, and become more than what he is. This is not mere ambition or the hunger for dominance over others, but the deeper impulse to create, to overcome obstacles, and to transform yourself into something greater. It is the engine of all human excellence, the fire that drives artists to create masterpieces and philosophers to penetrate the mysteries of existence. Yet observe how this sacred force becomes perverted when channeled through lust. The same energy that could build empires, create art, or forge an unbreakable character gets squandered in the pursuit of fleeting pleasure. The man who should be sculpting himself into a work of art instead becomes enslaved to his appetites, mistaking the temporary rush of conquest for genuine power. He confuses the ability to seduce with the capacity to create, not realizing that each surrender to compulsive desire weakens the very foundation of his strength. When lust corrupts the will to power, a man begins to measure his worth by his sexual conquests rather than his character development. He trades the slow, difficult work of self-mastery for the quick gratification of physical dominance, not understanding that true power flows from within outward, not from external validation inward. This is why Nietzsche warned that the man who cannot command himself will always be commanded by his desires, becoming a slave precisely when he believes himself most free. Nietzsche observed that humanity had developed two fundamental approaches to morality, master morality and slave morality, and nowhere is this distinction more crucial than in how a man relates to his own desires. The master creates values from his own strength and vision, defining what is noble based on his own excellence and self-overcoming. He does not seek approval or validation from others because his worth emanates from within, like a sun that shines by its own nature rather than reflecting borrowed light. The slave morality of desire reveals itself when a man begins measuring his value through the responses of others, particularly women. He becomes reactive rather than active, defining his masculinity not by his own standards, but by external validation. Watch how such a man's mood fluctuates based on attention received, how his confidence crumbles when desire is not reciprocated, how he adapts his personality to become more appealing rather than more authentic. This is the essence of slave morality, seeking worth through the eyes of others rather than through self-created values. The man trapped in this dynamic has unconsciously accepted that his value depends on being chosen, wanted, or desired by others. He has inverted the natural order, where strength attracts rather than chases, where authenticity commands respect rather than begging for approval. Nietzsche would recognize this as a profound sickness of the soul, where the individual has forgotten that true nobility comes from self-determination, not from being validated by those whose opinions should matter far less than your own unwavering commitment to becoming who you truly are. Nietzsche's concept of eternal return asks the most terrifying question a man can face: if you had to live, your exact life again and again for eternity, every moment repeated infinitely, would you embrace this fate with joy or recoil in horror? This thought experiment reveals the quality of our choices, because only actions aligned with our deepest values and highest potential can withstand the weight of infinite repetition. The man living authentically would welcome eternal return, while the man wasting his life would be crushed by the prospect. Consider the man caught in cycles of empty sexual conquest, endlessly repeating the same pattern of pursuit, temporary satisfaction, and inevitable emptiness. He mistakes the intensity of the hunt for meaningful experience, not recognizing that he is trapped in a loop that produces nothing of lasting value. Each encounter follows the same script, the same emptiness afterward, the same need to begin the hunt again. If this man truly faced eternal return, he would see the horror of repeating these hollow victories forever, each one as meaningless as the last. The wise man asks himself whether his desires serve his becoming or trap him in cycles that diminish rather than elevate. True pleasure, according to Nietzsche, comes from activities that enhance life, that contribute to growth and self-overcoming. When sexual energy is channeled toward genuine connection, artistic creation, or personal transformation, it becomes worthy of eternal return. But when it serves only momentary release without contributing to your evolution, it becomes a prison disguised as freedom, a wheel of repetition that grinds away the very essence of what makes life worth living. Nietzsche challenged humanity to move beyond the simplistic categories of good and evil imposed by conventional morality, recognizing that life itself operates according to deeper, more complex principles than social rules can capture. In the realm of attraction and desire, this means transcending the moralizing that clouds our vision and prevents us from seeing clearly what is actually happening. Society teaches men to judge their desires as either virtuous or sinful, creating unnecessary guilt and confusion that obscures the real dynamics at play. The man who moves beyond good and evil does not eliminate moral consideration, but rather develops a more sophisticated understanding of his own nature and motivations. He observes his attractions without immediately categorizing them as shameful or praiseworthy, instead asking what these desires reveal about his current state of development. Is this attraction arising from strength or weakness, from abundance or scarcity, from genuine appreciation of beauty, or from compulsive need to fill an inner void? This honest self-examination requires courage because it strips away comfortable self-deceptions. When you operate beyond conventional moral categories, you begin to see that many attractions labeled as natural or healthy are actually expressions of weakness, while some desires society condemns might contain seeds of genuine vitality. The key is not whether desire conforms to social expectations, but whether it serves your higher development or keeps you trapped in cycles that prevent growth. This is the true morality for the free spirit, not the adherence to external rules, but the commitment to honestly evaluating whether each choice moves you toward or away from becoming the person you have the potential to be. Nietzsche envisioned the Übermensch as humanity's next evolutionary step, the man who creates his own values and transforms his raw life force into something magnificent rather than dissipating it through base impulses. This superior man understands that sexual energy is among the most powerful forces available to human consciousness, capable of driving both creation and destruction depending on how it is channeled. The Übermensch does not suppress this energy through false morality, nor does he waste it through compulsive release. Instead, he transmutes it into fuel for his highest aspirations. Watch how the ordinary man handles sexual energy, and you will see why he remains ordinary. He either fights against his nature through repression, creating internal conflict and neurosis, or he surrenders completely to every impulse, becoming a slave to forces he cannot control. The Übermensch takes a third path, acknowledging the power of sexual energy while directing it consciously toward goals that elevate rather than diminish his essential nature. This is not about becoming celibate, but about becoming intentional, using desire as raw material for self-creation rather than letting it use you. The transformation of sexual energy into creative force requires what Nietzsche called self-overcoming, the ability to say no to immediate gratification in service of long-term excellence. When a man learns to harness this primal energy, he discovers reserves of power he never knew existed, power that can be directed toward artistic creation, physical mastery, intellectual development, or building something meaningful in the world. This is why the Übermensch appears superhuman to ordinary observers, not because he lacks human drives, but because he has learned to orchestrate them like a master conductor directing a symphony. Nietzsche recognized two fundamental forces in human nature: the Apollonian drive toward order, beauty, and rational structure, and the Dionysian impulse toward ecstasy, passion, and the dissolution of boundaries. The healthy individual integrates both forces, using Apollonian discipline to give form to Dionysian energy, creating art, philosophy, and meaningful relationships that honor both structure and spontaneity. However, modern man often falls into the trap of pure Dionysianism, mistaking chaos for freedom and compulsion for vitality. The Dionysian trap reveals itself when celebration of life becomes slavery to impulse, when the joyful embrace of existence degenerates into mindless hedonism. The man caught in this trap believes he is living fully because he follows every desire, not recognizing that true Dionysian energy requires conscious participation rather than unconscious surrender. He mistakes the feeling of being carried away by passion for genuine ecstasy, not understanding that real transcendence comes from dancing at the edge of chaos while maintaining your essential center. Observe how different this is from authentic Dionysian experience, which Nietzsche described as a sacred intoxication that enhances rather than diminishes your connection to life. True Dionysian energy in sexuality creates deeper intimacy and genuine pleasure because it emerges from abundance rather than desperation, from strength rather than weakness. The man who has fallen into the Dionysian trap uses sex to escape himself, while the man who has integrated both forces uses it to discover himself more fully, finding in physical union a mirror that reflects his own capacity for joy, creativity, and transcendence. Amor fati, the love of fate, represents Nietzsche's highest ideal for human existence, the ability to embrace everything that happens to you as necessary for your development, including the painful experiences that ordinary consciousness tries to avoid. This is not passive resignation, but active acceptance, finding in every circumstance the raw material for your continued becoming. For the man learning to master his relationship with desire, amor fati becomes especially crucial when facing rejection, loss, or the gap between what he wants and what reality provides. Most men experience rejection as a personal attack on their worth, allowing external circumstances to determine their internal state and self-perception. They resist the reality that desire often goes unfulfilled, that attraction is not always mutual, that the universe operates according to its own logic, rather than their personal preferences. This resistance creates suffering that goes far beyond the initial disappointment, trapping them in cycles of resentment, self-pity, and desperate attempts to control outcomes that lie outside their influence. The man who practices amor fati approaches rejection differently, recognizing it as information about reality rather than judgment about his value. He understands that being rejected by someone who is not truly compatible serves his highest good, that disappointment often redirects energy toward more worthy pursuits, that every closed door strengthens his capacity to walk his own path with dignity. This perspective transforms rejection from defeat into education, from obstacle into opportunity for deeper self-knowledge and stronger character, allowing him to move through the world with the confidence that comes from accepting rather than fighting the fundamental nature of existence. When Nietzsche proclaimed that God is dead, he was diagnosing the collapse of traditional meaning structures that had given human life direction and purpose for centuries. This death creates what he called nihilism, the dangerous condition where individuals lose their sense of ultimate meaning and begin grasping desperately for anything that might fill the void. In modern romance, this nihilistic crisis manifests as men seeking in relationships and sexual conquest the transcendent meaning they can no longer find in traditional sources like religion, community, or clear social roles. The man living in this post-religious landscape often unconsciously elevates romantic and sexual experiences to sacred status, expecting from human connection what previous generations found in their relationship with the divine. He seeks salvation through seduction, transcendence through physical pleasure, and ultimate meaning through being chosen by another person. This creates an impossible burden for relationships to bear, turning every romantic encounter into a desperate search for cosmic significance that no finite human experience can provide. This misplaced seeking creates its own form of suffering, because human relationships, however beautiful, cannot bear the weight of ultimate meaning without breaking under the pressure. The woman becomes not a person, but a symbol of salvation. The sexual experience becomes not pleasure, but a sacrament, and disappointment becomes not temporary setback, but existential crisis. Until a man learns to create his own meaning, independent of external validation, he will continue to demand from romance what it cannot give, turning what should be joyful connection into anxious grasping for something that must be found within himself rather than through another person. Nietzsche's famous imperative to become who you are requires a profound understanding of your authentic nature beneath the layers of social conditioning, family expectations, and cultural programming that shape most human behavior. This self-discovery cannot happen while constantly seeking validation from others or defining yourself through relationships, because external influences inevitably distort your perception of your own essence. The man who never learns to be alone with himself never learns who he actually is, remaining forever dependent on others to tell him his worth and direction. Solitude is not loneliness, but rather the conscious choice to spend time developing your relationship with yourself, discovering your genuine interests, values, and aspirations without the interference of other people's opinions or desires. In this sacred space, away from external pressure, you begin to distinguish between what you truly want and what you think you should want, between authentic desire and borrowed ambition. The man who can find fulfillment in his own company develops an unshakable foundation that makes him attractive not from neediness but from abundance. Most men fear solitude because they mistake being alone for being rejected, not recognizing that the capacity to enjoy your own presence is the foundation of all genuine confidence. When you no longer need constant companionship to feel complete, you begin relating to others from choice rather than compulsion, from strength rather than weakness. This transformation changes everything about your interactions with women, because you are no longer seeking them to fill a void, but rather to share the fullness you have cultivated within yourself, making you infinitely more attractive than the man who approaches from emptiness seeking to be filled. Nietzsche called for a transvaluation of all values, a fundamental re-examination of inherited beliefs to determine which serve human flourishing and which perpetuate weakness and mediocrity. In the realm of sexuality, this means questioning every assumption about what constitutes healthy desire, meaningful connection, and authentic masculine behavior. The man who undertakes this difficult work must be prepared to discover that many values he inherited from society, family, and culture actually work against his highest development, rather than supporting it. Modern sexual values often reflect slave morality disguised as liberation, teaching men to measure their worth through conquest while secretly keeping them trapped in cycles of validation seeking and external dependence. The transvaluation process requires you to examine each belief about sexuality and relationships, asking not whether it conforms to social expectations, but whether it serves your evolution into a stronger, more authentic version of yourself. This might mean rejecting the idea that sexual experience automatically equals personal growth, or questioning whether the pursuit of variety actually leads to deeper satisfaction. The man who successfully transvalues sexual values creates his own code based on what enhances rather than diminishes his essential nature. He might discover that periods of celibacy serve his development better than constant sexual activity. That deep connection with one person offers more growth than surface encounters with many, or that channeling sexual energy into creative pursuits produces more lasting satisfaction than immediate release. This personal code emerges not from external authority, but from honest self-examination and the courage to live according to your own discoveries rather than inherited assumptions about what a man should want or do. The question that will define your entire future as a man is this: will you continue wasting your most powerful energy chasing temporary pleasures that leave you weaker, or will you finally harness that same force to create something worthy of the strength you were born to carry? Take a moment right now to honestly examine your own patterns, your own relationship with desire and power. Then share in the comments what you discovered about yourself, because your breakthrough might be exactly what another man needs to hear. If this awakened something in you, if you felt the truth of Nietzsche's warning resonating in your bones, then subscribe to this channel and join the community of men who refuse to accept mediocrity as their fate, because the world needs you to become who you truly are, not who your weaknesses have convinced you to remain.